Welcome back into the Rounding Third podcast. My name is Nick, and we got Harrison with us again tonight. How you doing, Harrison?
I'm great. Happy to be here. Good to see you, Nick.
All right. Yeah, a lot to talk about this week.
Yeah.
And I see you switched up your stadium. Love it. Gave you the challenge last week, and
Yep.
didn't
I
disappoint.
had to pay honor to the Mets, who've had quite the free agency spending spree, and I really wanted to picture a Shea Stadium, but come to find out, everybody hated that stadium. So there's really no record of it in terms of pictures. So I settled for Citi Field.
Nice. It's awesome. All right, before we get started, please like and follow our page, share our page. Okay, we're trying to get as many viewers as we can, and I'd love to hear and talk about baseball. All right, leading off tonight, we have the labor update. We did lockout. Was it last
Wednesday?
Last
Yep.
Wednesday officially. The commissioner put out a letter. The MLBPA put out a letter. I'm going to touch on the points of the commissioner's letter first, and then I'm going to read the MLBPA's letter because that one's not really that long. So at the beginning of the letter, the commissioner, he just kind of thanks to baseball fans for being committed and staying together through all the COVID stuff and all that stuff. So then now here he kind of goes into it. He goes, I want to explain to you how we got here and why we have to take this action today. Simply put, we believe that an off-season lockout is the best mechanism to protect the 2022 season. We hope that the lockout will jumpstart the negotiations to get us to an agreement that will allow us to start on time. So he's trying to say this lockout is going to put pressure on him to get a deal done before the 2022 season.
Yep.
So he says from the beginning, the MLBPA has been unwilling to move from their starting position, compromise, or collaborate on solutions. So he's pretty much completely calling out the MLBPA right now, saying that they're pretty over the top with what they want. And we'll get into that too. They brought up the point where players are complaining about not getting paid, but yet the owner shelled out the most money that's ever been shelled out in a month. They $1.7 billion in the month of November alone, just the players. And that's the record by nearly 4 times. Okay, so I'm kind of on the owner side right now at this point. And then these are the common ground that the owners have already told the MLBPA they would make. So when the negotiations lacked momentum, they created some by accepting the universal DH to create a new draft system. So it's going to be like a lottery system like the NBA, and increase the competitive balance tax threshold, which what we were talking about was that floor, right? Is that right? What that means?
Yeah, exactly. It's the floor and then the hard cap at the top. So it creates effectively like a salary bracket that all the teams have to stay within, and the penalties are harsh the further away you get from it.
Yeah. So I mean that is what the MLBPA has pretty much put forward so far about what they're willing to give up in their view on this whole negotiations piece. Then the MLBPA released a letter about 2 days after, and they said, it's a really short letter, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. This shutdown is a dramatic measure regardless of the timing. It is not required by law or for any reason. It was the owner's choice, plain and simple, specifically calculated to pressure players into relinquishing rights and benefits and abandoning good faith bargaining proposals that will benefit not just the players, but the game and industry as a whole. These tactics are not new. We have been here before, and the players have risen to the occasion time and again, guided by solidarity that has been forged over generations. We will do so again here. We will remain determined to return to the field under the terms and negotiated collective bargaining agreement that is fair to all parties and provides fans with the best version of the game we all love. A lot to unpack on both of those. I honestly don't even know where to start.
No, they're way far apart, and now you've got two sides that are totally dug in and beginning to kind of indirectly blame each other. So
Yeah, I mean, so what they have, we'll start with what they have agreed upon.
yep.
Okay, so they have agreed upon expanded playoffs. However, the owners want 14 teams because, like, hey, if we're going to expand the playoffs, we better make some money out of it.
Well,
And
right.
and the players want 12. So, I mean, I like the playoff system as it is right now, as it stands. I don't know why we need to have 12 out of 30 teams make the playoffs.
I feel like now you're adding additional games into the length of the season. So in terms of wear and tear on pitchers and all that stuff, you're just lengthening an already long season. So what is going to end up happening is September baseball is going to be even worse for those teams that are in first place because they're going to rest people knowing they've got a longer playoff haul ahead of them. So September becomes garbage. I just the expanded playoffs. It's a slippery slope of getting into a whole section of the season that just isn't good.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, imagine Dave Roberts in an expanded playoffs. Like, he doesn't have enough bullpen arms. He's gonna he's gonna he's gonna have 9 guys on his starting lineup, and the rest of the roster is gonna be bullpen. Like,
Well, what's funny
seriously.
though, to that point though, Nick, is you may actually have some flex guys that, maybe in a series and then out of a series, and they may have to actually, basically build their
Oh yeah,
roster every round based on who's available. Because
absolutely.
that's just it's a lot of extra games, there's a lot of pressure situations, leverage situations. Pitchers are going to be coming in weird spots, high leverage, and it's going to be I don't know. I feel like it's just a slippery slope to getting to a point where you're going to make teams manage their rosters and lineups much differently because of it.
I agree. They've also agreed upon raising the league minimum. I did have. Okay, here it is. 46 last year. 46% of the players made less than $1 million. So half of the league made, less than a half. And then more than a third earned less than $600,000, which I think is league minimum. I'm guessing
Right.
it's got to be.
Yeah, it's like 575 or something is the league minimum.
So both want to raise the league minimum. Now, that kind of goes into the revenue sharing piece, but we'll get to that in a little bit. They have agreed upon a universal DH, so that then creates 15 new jobs, right?
Right.
Because you're going to keep the same amount of pitchers, but you're creating 15 new jobs for guys that can just hit. And then the draft lottery. I think the players want the draft lottery, and so do the owners. It sounds like they're willing to do that.
Yeah, I don't hate the lottery system. It's treated the NBA pretty well, giving some flexibility to the teams that are close but maybe weren't the worst. But it also takes away the real benefit of the tanking or just not caring because you're going to pick up a better pick. So lottery system at least makes it interesting.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And then they are going to remove the compensatory pick from free agents, which I have never really fully understood that. Like, if a guy's contract expires, it expires. Like, end of story. Like, why did the teams that sign the free agent have to give up a draft pick for it? I think that's so stupid.
Yeah, I get the point is to try to, give the incumbent the better negotiating position, so the other team has to take in mind the hit they take on the pick. But I mean, I don't think people value once you get outside of the first round. I think a lot of these GMs are like, whatever, you want a sandwich pick between the first and second round so I can sign your star player away. Fine, take it.
Yeah, I just don't get that. And then
no, it makes no sense.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, like, baseball still doesn't have a salary cap.
Right.
And the other 3 major sports do, right? Does basketball have a salary cap or no?
I think they go. I think they go the same luxury tax system that MLB's been using.
Okay, but still, I mean, these players are getting paid astronomically for.
Yep. Well, and I look at, and I think the hard part too with those salary numbers, it's a little bit misleading. So you look at the Red Sox as an example. The Red Sox have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that have a base salary under $1 million, and all of them, except for one, are pre-arbitration eligible, which means these are still guys that are on rookie contracts.
Right.
So it's Alex Verdugo, Nick Pivetta, Christian Arroyo, Darwinzon Hernandez, Bobby Dahlbeck, Garrett Whitlock, Tanner Houck, Austin Davis, and then the one vet was Jose Iglesias, who they basically signed for a cup of coffee.
Right.
But so, I mean, all of those guys are, in their first few seasons in the league, are going to get paid once they've served their time. But those
Right.
are, you've got a lot of players that are still on that first contract in those first 5 years of service where they're not making a lot of money, but they're all on the verge of signing a big contract. But it creates this hierarchy. The young guys come in and then work their way up into bigger contracts, and the system seems to work pretty well in terms of affordability, but also allowing these guys to get in, prove it, and make their money.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, but that's now the league minimum is going to be raised. I mean, I think that comes out of these negotiations for sure.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it is what it is, whatever. Another stat that I saw that I was kind of interested in is there was 1,373 players that were used in the MLB in 2021. That's up 17% in the last 10 years. So that's a combination of a couple things, like guys getting hurt, the game changing, careers not lasting as long. But yeah, I just thought that was fairly interesting, that point. Yeah. So the players' concerns are, the big one was they want free agency to be less than the 6 years of MLB service time. Now, I don't really have any strong feelings either or on this. But as a team, like if you have a young superstar, like you want to have good 6 years out of him before losing him to a $500 million contract.
Well, I think MLB got this one right in how they set it up originally, because you think about, so a major league team drafts these guys and then runs them through the minor leagues and all the camps and fall ball and winter ball and all this stuff. They develop these players. They make a pretty sizable investment in them. It's nice to know that when they do hit the major league roster and you spent all that time and money to get them there, they're not just going to be there for a few years and gone. 5 years versus 6 years, does that make a huge difference? I don't know. But I do like the system overall, and I don't know if one extra year, really makes a big difference. But I know why MLB did it, and I think the players are. I think if you go from 6 to 5 now, next time they're going to want to go from 5 to 4, 4 to 3. They're just going to keep chipping away at that, and I think that's where this thing will fall apart. That's probably one spot where if MLB gives in, they know that long term they'll lose.
And I mean, that's a great point, because I mean they're gonna keep taking until they get drafted and they're like, yeah, I'm a free agent, so thanks for drafting me, but I can go wherever I want. Like, it's ridiculous.
I mean, if I'm MLBPA, I'm going after the definition of when the clock starts. Like, I think I like the Chris Bryant situation and how these teams manage these minor leaguers. The fact that they don't bring them up until May 1st to avoid having a whole full service year accrued. And like, I would get rid of that. From the minute you step on a major league field and you're on that active roster, the clock starts ticking like that.
Right.
If I'm MLBPA, I wouldn't go after the years. I'd go after when the clock starts, because by default, you're going to get a year back.
Yeah, right. But the only time I would probably stop it, honestly, mid-August, or a few, like 3 or 4 weeks before the rosters expand.
Yeah,
that's really
August 15th.
Yeah, I mean, perfect time, because you don't want Jared Duran coming up and staying for 2 weeks and then going, but his clock started.
Right.
I mean,
right. Yeah. If you step on the field in April, May, June, or July, then that should count towards a year, because you've been there for, at least a significant enough portion of it to accrue. So I think that's the better play for MLBPA, is to go after that definition versus try to actually change the overall rule.
Yeah. So here's where the biggest split of this whole thing is, where they are miles apart And this is where it could get really messy and we could be locked out for quite a while. The MLBPA wants the revenue sharing to stop. So they think that they want all teams to be competitive all the time, to spend the most money as they can, to be competitive because they're being competitive every day. I get that point, but it just does not make sense. The owners are seeing it like a smart business. So they're going to spend when they see an open window of opportunity. But if they don't see that window, then they're not going to spend and waste money just knowing they're going to come in last in their division. Just doesn't make sense.
No.
And they're miles apart. I don't see this getting resolved anytime soon here.
Well, and I think the dangerous part to that too is that, the Players Association wants the players to get paid more. MLB wants some parity. I think the concept of the salary floor and the salary cap and the hard cap actually makes sense. So that you basically create a bracket you've got to stay within. But you can't do that and then go after revenue sharing, because you can't tell the Pittsburgh Pirates that, hey, we're going to take your revenue sharing away, but require you to double your payroll. Don't know how you're going to afford that, but good luck. You're basically you're gonna have like 10 major league teams that no longer become viable, and you'll have owners that are fire sailing them or trying to get out of them because they'll never work. These guys will just
Or
be
like I
hemorrhaging
said,
money for years.
yeah, or just fold completely.
Yeah, done.
Like not be a franchise anymore. Like imagine that. The Pittsburgh Pirates are one of the most historic franchises in the league. And they could literally fold after this negotiations if they don't go correctly.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's just no way.
No. I mean, the owners want the parity. That's why they want to continue the revenue share. And the players are saying that there is enough parity now. I don't know. I don't get that necessarily, why they want the revenue sharing to stop. Why the players are fighting for that.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is the players think if the revenue sharing stops, then your large market teams like the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets can just spend like crazy, pay ridiculous luxury taxes, and basically build super teams. That's the only thing I can think of these players are going after is, I want to do what LeBron's done and build a super team. And this is the way to do it. Now I can go play with my friends and put together an all-star team and go play in Los Angeles because it's 75 degrees every day. Otherwise, it makes no sense because they're in the end just going to hurt themselves.
Yeah, and I saw that there is parity in the MLB right now. It might not seem like it, but there is. So, and here's the stats to prove it: 17 franchises, so more than half that have played, that are in the MLB, have played in the last 14 World Series, and no one has repeated as World Series champions in 20 years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean there is parity, but I mean I get it. It's like, you have that one or two teams like the Nationals a couple of years ago that kind of sneaks in, and they get hot and they make a great run.
The Atlanta Braves.
Right, Atlanta Braves this year, but you're not going to see the Pirates do it. You're not going to see the Rockies do it. You're not going to see the Diamondbacks do it. Like that's the only thing that yeah, I don't know. What's your thought on the parity?
I think that I agree. I mean, I think this is probably the greatest parity the league has seen in terms of, the Dodgers went to 3 World Series in a row. They only won one of them, but they were there. The Astros have been, 5 straight ALCSs. But at the same time, flip to football as a comparison, because everybody talks about the parity in the NFL. For 20 years, the Patriots reigned hell on the league, and that's still considered the model of parity. And yet the Patriots were in every AFC championship and went to 9 Super Bowls. I mean, they were in every other Super Bowl for a stretch of time, and in basically every AFC championship game. So, but they always played different people. They were the constant, but it was always a revolving door of other teams. So, I think baseball's probably you could argue, and it's in the best spot it's been in our lives, at least in terms of parity and and variety of teams. But
Yeah.
I don't think that what they're going to do is going to accomplish making that better.
Yeah. I mean, Scott just made a good point. I know you just put it up about trading
Yep.
Mookie to get under the luxury tax. Now, I mean, the Red Sox weren't going to pay that contract, and I don't think Mookie wanted to stay in Boston. Like, we offered him a pretty good chunk of change, and Mookie was like, "No, thanks. I'm gonna."
Yeah, they offered him what, 10 years, 300, or was it 12 years,
something
300?
like that.
But still, I mean,
either way.
ask the Anaheim Angels how it's worked out since giving Mike Trout that contract. Ask these teams that have given out these massive contracts how it's worked out. When you have that much payroll tied up in one player, it is really hard to build a lineup around them, and it doesn't work unless you can go and spend $200 million. But even then, a guy making 30 or 40 million bucks is 20% of your payroll.
Right. Yeah.
You can't do it. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why the Yankees consistently fall short, because they can't build enough depth on that roster with all those massive contracts.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have the best offensive team in the world, but if you don't have a pitching staff to back them up, then you're scoring 9 runs a game, but you're giving up 12. Like,
right. Just that model doesn't work.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch this going forward and see how it unfolds. But the other thing is like, this is one of the best free agent years that in recent memory. And like, instead of celebrating these teams literally like completely changing who they are because of who they're signing for free agents. I mean, they're completely changing the landscape of what these teams look like. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this lockout, and it's a killer for baseball when it was literally just starting to trend back up. Like, this could be an absolute killer. And
it could be.
Yeah.
It could be. And so Scott makes a good point here, and it's a question I think a lot of us had going into this is, why are these teams spending all this money when they don't know what the deal is going to be, and would they've been better off waiting? And there's 2 schools of thought to this. There are the teams that were saying, I need to build my plan for next year because I don't know when the off season is going to restart, and I don't want to be wondering in February if we come back, or March when we come back, who I'm signing. Because keep in mind, you can't negotiate with free agents right now. Baseball's stopped.
Right.
There's no baseball right now. You can't negotiate. You can't even talk to free agents right now. So if you're a team that was trying to negotiate a contract or had somebody on your radar, you can't talk to them until this comes back, and you don't know when that is. So as you're beginning to plan your next season, you don't know who's going to be on your roster. So there's some teams that said, look, I know what the rules are today, and I'm going to deal with the fallout later because, of course, MLB is going to have to create a phase-in of anything. Nothing will start immediately. But I need to build a roster and be competitive next year. So I think there's some teams like Texas that said, we're going hard now, so we know what we're working with when we come back. And then there's other teams that I think more like the Red Sox who sat back a little bit and said, I'm going to let this play out and see what comes of it. And where things are when we come back. So we have a better set of rules, but also potentially, some clarity on where this is all going. But I do think that's why some teams jumped, like the Rangers. And I also think that's why you saw players like Buxton and Franco signed early, because they want to tie him up while they can, and while the rules are allowing them to do so, because we don't know what it's going to look like when they get back.
Right. And we talked about too, it's like those lower teams that have been below that threshold, they can spend, and still, if there's a floor, they're going to be above it, and they're not even going to come close to the salary cap if they put one in. So, like, Texas Rangers has been way under that. So even signing Simeon and Seager, there's still probably, I mean, just them themselves are probably 70 million. But the rest of their payroll probably barely puts them over 100. Like,
they got plenty of room.
Crazy to think about, but I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But I think also too, like, baseball just doesn't have the rivalries anymore. Eminem, the SOS podcast, was talking about that a little bit because they did a little bit of like off-season free agency and stuff like that, and they made a good point where, like, the Red Sox and Yankees rivalry is not ever going to come back. You know, I mean, and if you think about it, it's like, yeah, they're still rivals, but the reason it was a rival was because of remember what Jim Rowe said a few weeks ago? It was like the Yankees would just repeatedly come in and beat the crap out of us year after year after year. We think we'd have a good team and then we'd lose, you know? And then finally, when we won, that rivalry just kind of dies down,
Well,
you
and I think
know?
too, you look at that rivalry, and that rivalry was so fierce in the '90s and early 2000s because the Red Sox were trying to get in and trying to win that elusive first World Series, and the Yankees kept beating them down, and they had the dynasty there in the '90s. But more
Yeah,
importantly, you had a lot of the same players for a long time.
right,
You had continuity. You had Veritek and Pedro. And on the Yankee side, you had Jeter and Musina and Pettit, and you had those guys that were around for a
right.
while.
Always
That
there.
that Yankees roster is almost 100% different than what it was even 3 years ago. A guy
Yeah,
like Garrett Cole, DJ LeMahieu, Giancarlo Stanton, these guys have no idea what the rivalry is. They just got to town.
it's true.
Um, this isn't like the days of those teams where you had those core players that were there for so long that kind of carried that torch. Veritek punching A-Rod in the face. Um, you had those defining moments, but those players weren't gone the next season. They were there for a while, and that just continued on. That Yankees
Yeah,
roster is almost unrecognizable, and that team has no character. Like those guys, that's 25 guys, 25 cabs, the way the Yankees used to be when they
yeah,
weren't any good. And
right,
there's nothing there that works. Like they're not a team you want to be a rival with because they don't even know each other.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I didn't even think about it that way, but I mean, that's how this free agency is going to affect it as well, right? If they do it in 5 years, like you said, the teams are going to be forever changing,
Yeah,
and you're gonna go buy a jersey, and then on game two, like the guy's gone.
right,
Like,
right. It's
you're like,
massive turnover, but
yeah, that's $120 out the door. Like,
right,
like goodness
yeah.
gracious.
$120 I'll never get back. That was good for a couple seasons and gone. I mean, I still
Yeah,
I still have my replica road jersey for Nomar hanging in my closet.
I have the home version, so yeah, I gotcha.
Nice. Yeah, we all did.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see where this goes. I think a deal will get done before the
Yep.
season. Um, I think it will be late February, early March, where they're not cutting into spring training, but it like really puts a pressure on
Yep.
both sides to be like, okay, let's meet longer than 7 minutes this time and get something done.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and
So
I
I think
and
that's
I
where
think
we
you
are.
were I think you were right when you were talking about kind of what Manfred said and the fact that a stoppage is the best way to negotiate. And what you're saying is absolutely right. Until these guys feel the pressure to have to do something, they're just going to continue to pander and have their 7-minute walkout meeting and blow in and blow out in their expensive suits like they had important business to conduct when in reality they're just grandstanding.
Yeah.
Until these guys feel the pressure of losing a season or drifting into spring training and then the regular season and then game checks don't come and players aren't getting paid and that's when the players are calling Tony Clark and screaming at him to make a deal.
Yeah.
Until you put pressure on both sides, they'll just sit there and stare at
Yeah.
each other because they've got literally nothing to lose right now. Nobody's getting paid anyways.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Um, yeah. So Scott made another comment. He said Harper signed the minute free agency
Yeah,
started a few years back, and they talk all the time when they can't. I mean, yes, talks are still going on. The Red Sox are still putting out reports that they're interested in Trevor Story. So, like, there's still like the
right.
game going on, but not officially. Like
Oh, yeah,
they're not picking up the phone directly and talking to Trevor Story.
right.
They're just throwing it out to the universe, being like, "Hey, the Red Sox are still interested." Trevor Story, just
Yeah.
in case.
Well, and Scott's 100% right. They're these big guys are all represented by the same agents, so they're leaning over and going,
Right,
hey, Scott Boras, well, we're talking about so and so. Can
right,
you maybe drop a dime and tell him too we're interested?
yeah,
Or hey, Scott, we're thinking about Trevor a little bit. Like, what do you think? These guys are constantly back channeling like politicians.
Yeah,
So no, are they
absolutely.
calling Trevor Story directly and saying, "Hey, Trevor, you want to come to Boston?" No, but they're basically saying, "Hey, Trevor, you want to come to Boston?" by telling everybody else they want him to come to Boston.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so yes,
Yeah.
Scott's right. They can't talk to these guys, but they're talking to them through other people.
Right. All right. We are gonna move on. That was a lot to unpack, and oh, we got most of it out, if not all of it, for now. I'm sure more stuff will come out
Yeah,
in the next
it's
week
going to
or
be ever
two.
evolving.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to the fifth inning showdown where Harrison and I are going to discuss what we think the most untouchable record is. Now, I think there's a ton of records that are unbreakable, but what do you think is the most untouchable? Like the one that will never, ever, ever, be achieved as long as baseball exists.
Yeah, so I feel, I mean, I agree. There's just dozens and dozens of records that I think will never be touched because the game has changed so much. But I went with Cy Young's 511 career wins. Most of these guys won't get 511 career starts, let alone wins. But
Right.
what's even more fascinating with Cy Young is he had 749 complete games in his career. I mean,
Silly.
749 complete games. I mean that number just blows your mind. If the average starter in Major League Baseball gets 30 starts a year, I should say average. If your elite starters get 30 starts a year, if they go 20 seasons, they only get 600 total career starts.
Right.
And not a single one of these guys makes it 20 seasons without missing one or two to a massive injury, or they just can't make it 20 seasons. But most of these guys will never even get enough starts to get to sniff that record.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. Um, so Stacy and Doug commented real quick when I just reminded everybody that we had a show tonight, not last night because the Pats won. But then, and Stacy said Johnny Vandermeer threw back-to-back no
Yep.
hitters. That will never ever be done again. But I think his were a little funky though. His were the last game of the season. I think the opening day of the next year. I don't think they were, or maybe they were mid-June. I don't know. It was something weird like
Yeah.
that, I think. But it will never be done again. I mean, that's just crazy. The
No, I
odds of
mean back to
that.
back no
But
hitters that's nuts. I mean, could it be done? Yeah, I mean a guy
sure.
could get really hot for 18 innings, but
Yeah.
I
Stacy
just,
said they were in June. Yeah.
yeah,
They
I
were.
just
They were mid-June.
that would be that'd be something else. I could see somebody doing it like early in the season or late in the season when you're facing a bunch of minor leaguers or a bunch of guys swinging cold bats. Um, but the fact he did it in June of all times of the season when the ball carries and jumps, it just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Insane.
It's wild to think somebody can go 18 straight innings with no hits.
Yep. Doug said his was Joe DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak.
It's a tough one.
It's a very tough one, but however, like I'm a believer that every hitting record could be achieved. That's where I am
Yeah.
on that because
Yeah.
they still have the same amount of plate appearances. They still have the same chances to, you know, play 56 games straight and get a hit in each one. Like, like with the pitching ones, they just don't pitch every day anymore. Like that's how it is. My untouchable record that I don't think anybody will even sniff anymore is Nolan Ryan's 5,714 strikeouts. The guy pitched for like 30 something years for four organizations and was just dominant the entire time. No one's ever going to pitch that long ever again with that much domination to have almost 6,000 career strikeouts. The next guy I think is maybe Randy Johnson in like the 4,000s, but that's still 2,000 less than Nolan Ryan has. I mean, it's insane.
Mind-boggling to think that he pitched that long that effectively, and arguably, I bet that guy could be somebody's 5-starter today.
Yeah.
He's a freak. I came across one record that I couldn't even wrap my head around. But in 1932, Joe Sewell struck out 3 times over 576 plate appearances.
Dang.
I mean, that's a single game for like anybody on the Yankees lineup to strike out 3 times.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
some of these records are just mind-boggling at what people have done. I mean, you look at, just a couple that you and I kind of kicked around. We talked about Cal Ripken's 2,632 games,
Yeah.
Nolan Ryan strikeouts,
Never
but
again.
also Nolan Ryan walked 2,795 people. Like
Yeah.
that's an insane amount of walks.
Right.
Ricky Henderson stole 1,406 bases. You're lucky if somebody
Never.
steals 30 bases in a season anymore.
You're lucky if
Um,
somebody gets on base that many times, like has that many
right.
hits in a career.
Yeah. I mean, Barry Bonds walking 232 times in 2004. I mean, including twice with the bases loaded.
Right. Dude, imagine that, dude. You intentionally walked with the bases loaded.
Yeah,
Silly.
it's insane.
Crazy.
And then so Pete Rose had 15,890 plate appearances, and in those plate appearances had 4,256 hits. He got a hit in more than 25% of his plate appearances, but the guy got to the plate almost 16,000 times.
Yeah. It's nuts. Never gonna happen. The
No, I mean
longevity is just not there anymore.
it's unreal. Some of these records.
So I saw this one in just a couple days ago in 1884. Charles Radbourne had 59 wins in a season. I mean, no one knows who Charles Radbourne is, but still 59 wins in a season. Like that's just the difference of pitching then and the pitching now. Like he was solely a pitcher for that entire season. I do have a couple more. I have Ichiro had 10 consecutive seasons of 200 hits. You're welcome, Stacy. Mariners plug. And then Fernando Tatis Sr. What did he do, Harrison? Do you remember what he did?
Two grannies in an inning.
2 grand slams in 1 inning, dude.
I remember that. That was
crazy.
Nuts.
Yep.
Well, and to go back to
ahead.
Ichiro real quick, Ichiro had 262 hits in 2004.
Yeah, he broke the single season George Sisler record.
262 hits. I mean, who even makes contact 262 times in 600 plate appearances anymore?
No one. And I have a couple more. I got Ty Cobb's career 366 batting average.
That's nuts.
366. That's crazy. This one is even more mind-boggling to me. Ted Williams had an on-base percentage of 482.
Wow.
He almost got on base in half of his at-bats.
Yeah, that's
half.
That's amazing.
Plate appearances, right?
Right.
Plate appearances.
Right, because that includes walks.
Goodness gracious. And then All-Star games played by Hank Aaron, 25.
25, which means he played in at least 25 seasons. Like nobody does that anymore.
Nobody. I mean,
these guys are 12, 15 seasons max, and they're done. None of these guys are playing into their 40s much anymore. I mean,
they don't need to when they're getting paid $43 million a year, Max Scherzer. Like Joe DiMaggio played all summer long and then went and bagged groceries in the off season. Like, players aren't doing that anymore. They're going home to their 10,000 square foot houses and bowling in the basement, Mookie Betts. I mean, it's just a completely different time.
Yeah, there are 2 more interesting ones, then we got to move on. Most complete games in a season, 75 by Will White in 1879. And then most shutouts in a season, 16 by George Bradley in 1876. And then actually equaled by Grover Cleveland Alexander in 1916.
Jeez.
But
crazy.
There's so many baseball records, because the game has changed so much, they're not even like applicable to today's game.
Right. Yeah, you almost need like 2 separate record books, like 1850 to 1960, and then I agree, completely different games.
And Stacy thinks that somebody's going to break Ichiro's record. I don't think they will. I don't think anybody makes enough contact anymore to do it. But
the
approach
at the plate's way different. It's not.
Oh, totally different. And Ichiro is just a different animal. But the guy also had 700 plate appearances that season. I mean, nobody gets 700 plate appearances anymore.
No, I agree. All right, so we're going to move on to the 7th inning stretch. And we are down to our final 15 here. We're going to go 15 to 11. And this is where I think the parity in our lists are really going to start to show. I mean, we might have a couple of around the same, but go ahead and start with your number 15, Harrison.
Number 15 for me is my dark horse pick, the Texas Rangers, who now own the best middle infield in baseball. I think there's a lot of pride in that organization. Good ballpark, good market, some good history. They haven't necessarily had a great performance in the field, but they're one of those teams that, when you think back over the last 20 or 30 years, they've rolled a lot of incredible players through there. They've had a lot of really good seasons, a lot of runs, but never quite strung it all together for a long period of time. But I think that's one organization that is primed to come back roaring.
Yeah, I agree. Number 15 for me was the Washington Nationals / Senators / Montreal Expos / you name it. They got 4,000 wins, 7 Hall of Famers. So 4 from the Senators, and then the Expos, Tim Raines, Andre Dawson, and Gary Carter. They are 1-for-1 in World Series, and then 6 playoff appearances. But I pretty much kind of put them this high just because of the number of Hall of Famers and the amount of history they've had within the 3 franchises.
Now, does it count when you have to move that often to have that level of success, or?
Yeah, I think so. Because, I mean, if they're still, what about the Atlanta Braves? Right?
Yeah,
they were the Boston Braves, Milwaukee Braves, then the Atlanta Braves. So, I mean,
there's plenty of these organizations that have been lived out of suitcases for a little while.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. My number 14 is the Oakland Athletics. I know not your favorite, Harrison.
No.
But they have 9,146 career wins as a franchise.
Yeah, tons of history.
5 Hall of Famers: Dennis Eckersley, Raleigh Fingers, Ricky Henderson, Al Simmons, and Dick Williams. Oh, Dick. They're 9 for 14 in World Series and 29 playoff appearances as a franchise. So, I mean, there was just too much history there for me to rank them lower, but they're also not very high at 14. They're barely in the top 50%.
Yeah. Did you say 9 for 14 in the World Series?
Yeah.
That's an amazing stat.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where I put them, 14.
Okay, number 14 for me, San Diego Padres. Again, strong young ball club, good market, great ballpark. Again, a team that has had some runs of being really good and also some runs of being really bad. But always one of those organizations that would build it up and then tear it down a little bit, but never to the ground, then build it back up. And they've been consistently around. So, but again, another team I think that is poised to be a very strong organization here for the next, several years, given the way they've built themselves back up.
I agree. What do you got for 13?
13, I've got the White Sox. So, obviously Chicago, great market, although they are kind of like the little brother to the Cubs. But, again, World Series in the last 20 years, good young ball club, decent ballpark, good market. But overall an organization that has consistently churned out talent and has been around. You think back to when we were watching as kids, those are the days of the Big Hurt and all those guys. And
love that team, man. Robin Ventura, Ozzie Guillen, Joey Cora, Jack McDowell. I can name all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those teams were so good. Now were they? They were always competitive, not necessarily in the series or necessarily deep in the playoffs, but they were always there, and they were one of those teams that, like, I just remember for years, like, it was one team you'd see on the schedule and be like, oh, But I think they're poised to be a strong team for a while.
Yeah. One of my favorite plays I've ever seen watching a baseball game live, on TV, I wasn't live in person, but Bo Jackson at Yankee Stadium had his heels on the right field warning track. Mike Gallego for the Yankees was tagging up from second to third. Bo Jackson throws it off his back foot and hoses him out at third with no hop. Like, dude, stop.
Yeah, no.
And then, hold on. Is it the 7th inning? Guys, I got to run. I got a football game. Like,
Right.
Jesus Christ,
Yeah,
dude.
can you
Crazy.
pinch hit for me? I got to go run the ball 150 yards down somebody's throat.
Goodness gracious.
I still love the play of Bo Jackson when he ran up the wall and then back down the wall.
Yeah, just a freak athlete, man. But yeah, the White Sox were so fun to watch. I used to watch the Cubs all the time on WGN because WGN was like basic cable when I was growing up. So I'd come home and watch the Cubs because they didn't have lights on the field. But then Friday nights they switched to the White Sox, and I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. So I'd watch them once a week, but it was great.
That's nice.
13 for me is the Philadelphia Phillies. 9,829 wins as a franchise, 6 Hall of Famers, 2 for 7 in World Series, so but 14 playoff appearances. They're ranked that high just because of the number of wins they have as a franchise. They've been around for a while, almost 10,000 wins. That's why I have them at 13.
Well, and I mean, and 7 World Series appearances is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, only winning 2 of them hurts, but you've been there a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 12 is the Atlanta Braves. 10,722 wins, 11 Hall of Famers. I could list them all, but you could probably list them all yourself. This is why I had to rank them a little low, is because they're 4 for 10 in World Series, and they have 27 playoff appearances and only got to the World Series 10 times. I mean, it's a decent percentage, but they ran into a buzzsaw in the Yankees in the 90s. Like, they were there every single year, but just couldn't get over that hump. So that's why, yes, it's a Yargos hat. But, yeah. So I don't know. I that's where I just had to put them, I guess. Just mostly because of that 90s run. They just couldn't quite get over that hump. But
so frustrating. They were so good, and they just couldn't put it together.
Yep. And there was another team I saw on basic cable all the time when TBS was there on basic cable. I could watch the Braves whenever I wanted. But yeah, I rooted for them, but they just couldn't get there.
All right. Number 12 for me was the Nationals. Different reasons, but we've got them in the same general range. Again, recent World Series, decent young ball club. They let some big players go to rebuild, but a good organization, good market. A lot of history, so it's not like you're a expansion team that nobody knows about. Like, you've got some good history. I just think that that's a good organization that won't be down for long.
Yeah. I agree. And what do you got for 11?
Number 11 would be the New York Mets.
Nice.
They, obviously on a massive spending spree. New ballpark. Obviously, they're in New York, although they are the Yankees, little brother in many cases. But they have a varied loyal following in New York. You're clearly a Yankees or a Mets fan.
Yeah.
But I think it's a team that signed some bad contracts. It's a team that has a checkered past in terms of success and the moves they've made. Tons of question marks, an owner who's a wild card. I think they'll do well in spite of themselves, but I don't see this being a team that we're going to be talking about as the favorite in the NL for a while. Yeah.
All right. My number 11 is the Chicago White Sox. So I'm just a couple spots ahead. 9,321 wins. They've been around forever. I mean, 19 teams or so. 7 Hall of Famers: Aparicio, Luke Appling, Harold Baines. Not a Hall of Famer. Red Faber, Nellie Fox, Ted Lyons, and Frank Thomas. 3 for 5 in World Series. So if they get there, they can win them. 11 playoff appearances, so good percentage there, but they're just ranked high because of the amount of wins, the amount of years they've been a franchise, and they haven't moved. I mean, they've been there the entire time. So, again, like, I know Stacey didn't like that I put the Braves out of the top 10, but, like, I'm going with a legacy here. I mean, the Braves have jumped around. I love the Braves. Don't get me wrong. You're still bitter about your Mariners. I get it. But this is just how it is. I think the White Sox are not quite top 10, but they're there.
Yep. All I can say is, Stacy, don't worry. I took care of your Mariners. I'll take care of the Braves too. You can be mad at Nick. That's fine.
Yeah. What else is new? All right. So we love you. Thanks for listening. All right. So we're going to move on to our rounding third segment here, where we threw out the question, not really baseball related, but could be, what is the best championship game in sports? We got a pretty good variety of answers here. Ken Sawyer said March Madness. I mean, really hard to disagree with that. Every single game is lose or go home.
Yep.
There's no other tournament like it in the world, man. I mean, people take 2 days off of the opening round. They take that Thursday and Friday off from work just to watch the opening round.
Yeah, I mean, March Madness isn't a game. It's an event.
It's amazing.
I mean, literally, there are entire businesses that practically shut down because people are off watching this thing, and the following to it is insane. I mean, it's a holiday. It's basically becomes like a 2-week holiday.
Right. We got Ben Goodwin. He said World Cup final. That's usually a pretty good one too.
Good one that I never considered. Yeah.
Yeah, 0-0 in the 90th minute, and they have to go to penalty kicks because no one can score. It's riveting stuff.
Yep. I love watching guys run back and forth for 90 minutes and score no goals.
Yeah. What is it? If I wanted to see guys struggle for 90 minutes, I'd just go to a bar.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about right.
Yep. Morgan Sawyer put another good one in that I didn't think of, but sudden death golf to decide the tournament. So they need extra holes to decide the tournament. I can't even imagine being a golfer and trying to do that, but that's a great one, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, because I think when you think of some of the big golf moments, I think they were, either a big 18th hole or overtime. I remember when Tiger Woods won, I can't remember if it was the U.S. Open or what it was, but they had that sudden death where he's hobbled on a bad knee and still won it.
Yeah.
And it's just shot after shot, and not necessarily a ton of action, but a lot of intensity and excitement to every single one of those shots. So that's a good one.
Yeah. We have Mark Williams, old college roommate here, one of my best friends. He's joking around, but he said the 500th lap of the Daytona 500.
Yeah, because I have no interest in watching the first 499.
Right?
Wake me up for 500.
I don't even have interest watching the 500th one, but that's just me. But his were World Series Game 7 in the Super Bowl. I mean,
yep.
And the Super Bowl was the same for Doug and then Scott, who we heard from earlier today. But he also threw in World Series, and then he threw in Michigan and Ohio State. He's a huge Wolverines fan, but I mean, that's his Super Bowl, Michigan and Ohio State.
I was just going to say, if you're a Michigan fan, you're really happy this year.
Yeah, absolutely. In the playoffs, it's great. I'm happy.
I really thought we'd get more Super Bowl answers, because I think people think of the Super Bowl as the ultimate championship game. It's one and done. It's all the hype. It's the 2-week insanity leading up. But I got to say, the Super Bowl to me is it's either a blowout, or it's a snooze fest.
Yeah.
And I find the Super Bowl is almost always a letdown because the game itself is not good, or you have situations like, the Patriots in 2007 who lose the game on a weird catch that was stuck to a guy's helmet.
Right.
I don't know. I thought we'd get a lot more Super Bowl answers, because I actually don't. I don't even watch the Super Bowl most years because I just don't find the game to be that thing.
Yeah.
But give me an MLB Game 7 or an NHL Game 7, I'm in. Those are the two most exciting games to me.
I mean, I think that's where I'm at. I think NHL Game 7 is just unreal. And it's I am in love with baseball. I could watch baseball any day of the week, but an NHL Game 7, there is nothing like it. The intensity is insane. And it's just nuts. My friend Dave, I think, actually commented and said NHL Game 7 because it is insane.
Yep.
Yeah. What did you say? You said NHL or
My first choice has always been baseball. MLB Game is
baseball?
7. A
Yeah,
deciding game in baseball to me is always more exciting because you're hanging on every pitch. That this
yeah,
next pitch could be the one that decides the game. And the thing with baseball, the people that don't like it because it's nothing happens, and you know what? For a lot of the game, nothing does happen, but
right.
there's those 2 or 3 moments that just like bam happen, and it changes the whole game. It's that
Changes the
one
whole
pitch.
series,
Right.
right?
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
true. It could change the outcome of the whole series. It's that one pitch, the one blooper, the one bad bounce, the one
yeah,
bang bang play. It's those things that in an instant the whole game changes. That other sports, except maybe the NHL. The NHL has some of the same kind of quick impact moments, but
yeah,
they just don't have like there's not that instantaneous game altering, series altering moment like baseball gives you.
yeah. Yeah, and I think Game 7 for the NBA is a snooze fest. Like
Oh.
it's a glorified 3-point contest now. The NBA is I can't watch it. It's unwatchable to me.
No,
But
I've
yeah,
found the NBA unwatchable for like 10 years. Like I can't
yeah,
watch
it's
basketball.
tough.
It's either dunk fest or a 3-point shooting competition. Nobody plays defense. Half these guys don't even know how to spell pass, let alone actually do it.
Let's spread the
Um,
floor and give it to our best player and have him go
oh,
ISO to the hoop. No one
right.
moves. No one. It's
And
brutal.
it's these super teams where you've got these 3 or 4 all-star players that are just like playing street ball with each other. And
Yeah,
yeah, and you're right. It's basically let's spread out, let's find a mismatch, let's give the best player the ball and let him just run somebody over or shoot in his face. And the game itself is boring. And I also just find basketball boring in general because you go up the floor and score, then back up the floor and score, and then score, and then
yeah,
score, and then score, and then score. It's like when when you're expected to score every time down the floor, it's not really that exciting.
right. Yeah, I agree. All right, and now we are heading home. So we got a little bit of free agent talk, which is kind of weird since we are locked out. But we did have a couple of last minute signings right before the lockout last Wednesday. We'll start with the Red Sox. Like I said earlier in the show, they have checked on Trevor Story. So
They've not
that
spoken to him, Nick. That's tampering. They've not spoken to him.
exactly. I would love that, honestly. Like if you're gonna move Xander to second or third, or Rafi at first or whatever, putting Trevor Story there with that monster, another right-handed bat. Yes, please.
Yeah, I actually believe if you went and got a guy like Trevor Story, you'd move him. I actually don't think you'd
Oh,
move
you think?
Xander. So I
Interesting.
I heard an interesting take, and I can't remember which one of the sports writers it was, but one of them had the take of that. A guy like Xander Bogaerts isn't going to move positions, and certainly not for a new person coming in. Maybe later in his contract he'd move, but the belief is if you go get like a Correa or a Story and ask Xander to move, he'll do it because he has to, but he's going to grab the opt out in his contract next year and leave.
It's a
So
great
really,
point.
if you go sign a Story or a Correa, you're basically letting Bogaerts go. But the flip side of it is there's belief that somebody like Story would be more likely to come in and move positions because apparently he has a history either in the minors or wherever of he has played third and second before. Short was not necessarily his first position, so he might be more open to a move. Correa will not move, and he's told people that I'm a shortstop. I'll be a shortstop. Don't ask me about a different position. But there's some belief that Trevor Story might actually be more open to a move and would play a different position. So I actually think if you sign Story, he might be the one that moves.
That's interesting because if you think about it, Xander came up as the third baseman.
I know.
So, I mean, would he be willing to go back over to third? I mean, he's been there, but like you
Yep.
said, like I didn't even think about that the opt out part of it. Where like if he's just a little bit disgruntled about it, he'll definitely grab the opt out, like you said.
Yeah. And he'll
Which,
go be a shortstop somewhere else.
yeah, no thanks. I'd like to keep him in Boston.
Yes, I agree. If you tell me I've got to pick Bogarts or Story, I'm keeping Xander.
Yeah,
Nothing against
absolutely.
Story, great player, but he's not Xander Bogarts.
Right, I agree. So they signed two veteran lefties. They signed James Paxton and Rich Hill. Rich Hill is about 67. I think he's collecting
At
Medicare at this
least.
point. I think he's collecting Medicare. Uh,
I'm
James
pretty
Paxton
I'm
is
pretty sure his
open.
grandkids are now our age, Nick. So
You're right, exactly. I think they're in the rotation as well. But Paxton could be. I think he could be a gap arm for us. I I mean, I don't think he's a great signing. Don't get me wrong, but
No.
I think it's another left-handed pitcher that kind of takes the place of Erod, where he's gonna go out and he's gonna give you a solid start here and there, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know.
Paxton was I mean, arguably a top tier rotation starter for a while there. Good velocity,
Mhm.
left-handed. He was challenging.
Yeah,
He was, you know, he's been in New York. He was in Seattle. He's got good stuff, but he's coming off Tommy John surgery. This this is so. Chaim Bloom comes to the Red Sox from the Rays, where he had to be, cheap and creative. And this is a move he never would have made with the Rays, but he's being creative here. And what I like about this deal for the Red Sox is this is a rich club problem. This is a
right,
big market club problem. James Paxton may not pitch much of any of this season coming up.
right.
He's still rehabbing from Tommy John. There's no real time frame for when he's going to be back. They think it could be, maybe the first couple months of the season, but really, he may not join the club until July or August for all you know, based on how his rehab goes and where he's at. But what they did was they signed him to a 1-year, $10 million deal. So they basically said, "Hey, James Paxton, we'll give you $10 million bucks, and you can come and maybe you play this year, maybe you don't, but we're going to put a 2-year club option in there. So if you look healthy, we're then going to lock you up for 2 years after that. So we'll get
Right.
healthy James Paxton in a couple of years, and we'll get him for 2 years, and it's only going to cost us $10 million bucks to basically secure the rights to you for the next 3 if we want them." And that's a big market ball club luxury where you can spend 10 million bucks to basically hide a
Just
player
yeah,
and
right.
see what they look like when they rehab. And if you don't
Yeah,
like what you look like, it's a 1-year deal. It costs you 10 million bucks, no harm, no foul. If you like how he looks, well, now you've got a 2-year club option at favorable terms that you can turn on, and he's there for 2 seasons as a middle to back end of the rotation guy.
yeah.
Again, for not a lot of money. So I actually think it's a really creative deal by Bloom. And he's kind of flexing his big market muscles and how he does it. But I like what he's doing here. It's a low risk move.
Yeah, I like that move. I hate this move. Now, all the nostalgia, I get it with Jackie Bradley Jr.
Oh,
Okay, like we loved him when he was in Boston. The guy can't hit water if he fell out of a boat. He's like a career like 186 hitter. I just Yeah, for Hunter Renfroe. So you traded a Gold Glove power hitter for a Gold Glove.
yep.
I'm lost there. I know they got 2 prospects in return with Bradley,
Yep.
but I just don't like that move. Hunter Renfroe put up a year for us.
I mean,
Like,
so you think about it. So you traded Hunter Renfroe, who hit 31 home runs and kind of anchored that lineup, to Jackie Bradley Jr., who couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Now, this move only makes sense if there's another move they're going to make. Now,
to make
I
cap space. That's got
right.
to be
I
the
I
only.
feel like because Jackie Bradley Jr. is not an everyday player. I mean, he's probably your 4th outfielder. He's your defensive specialist. You're going to see him come into a lot of games in the 7th or 8th inning to spell somebody and play some defense. He's going to start, twice a week, 3 times a week, maybe as a platoon guy. He's going to fill that old Brock Holt utility guy role and float around and give guys days off. But he's a 4th outfielder who's not going to hit his weight, who's going to
Yeah.
play ridiculously good defense and make some crazy catches. But this move only makes sense if there's another one out there.
If they're trying to re-sign Schwarber, it makes sense. I get it.
But the
Or
argument now with Renfroe gone is that if you go re-sign Schwarber, you're too left-handed heavy. So you actually probably don't even want Schwarber anymore.
right.
It's that's why I say this move only makes sense because by getting rid of Renfroe and bringing in a left-handed 4th outfielder, signing Schwarber doesn't make any sense because you're too left-handed.
Yeah.
But the flip side of it is that you're not going to play Jackie Bradley Jr. every day, so you've now got an outfield spot that's open. So who's coming to fill that hole?
I think
Like,
Jaron Duran makes the club this year.
oh, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe they've got that much faith in the young guy. They're going to say, "Look, kid, here's a spot, and JBJ is here in case you struggle."
Yeah.
But this, like I said, this deal only makes sense in the context of some other move. And maybe you're right. You may have nailed it. Or maybe they do think that the young guy's ready, or at least they're willing to give him a shot,
He
knowing
had
that
flash
JBJ is a
here.
safety net.
Yeah, Durant had some great moments when they brought him up in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid came up and just flat out raped, and he can fly. That kid is fast.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's fun.
Like, so I mean, I think if he develops a lot this offseason, who knows when the season starts?
Yep.
I think they're priming him to play center, and like you said, kind of have Bradley as a safety net.
Right. And and maybe that is a cap space move, so you can bring a guy like Story in and put him at second base because that's a big hole. Yeah. Arroyo's good, but he's not necessarily an everyday second baseman. He really belongs in that fourth outfielder, the extra infield role.
Yeah.
Another utility guy. So that would make sense to bring a guy like Story in. But you've also got a right-handed batter in Dahlbeck, who you don't know what you have there, but the kid hits bombs.
Yeah.
I think what you're seeing Chaim Bloom do is he's building a roster with a lot of options, which Tampa Bay always did. Tampa always had tons of guys floating around. They never knew who was going to be on the roster, but they always had options.
Right.
I think he's doing the same thing here, where he's bringing as many options in. They're going to vet them all, and they're going to build a roster out of it.
Yeah.
And some will work, and some won't.
I think the second base position too could be. I mean, I would love this signing, but Whit Merrifield. He was the second baseman for the Royals. I think he would be a great fit in Boston. An on-base guy. Yeah, on-base guy. Like, man, his stick in that lineup would be awesome.
That makes sense because you don't have a leadoff hitter in this roster today. You don't. No. Schwarber kind of filled that role in the playoffs, and it worked out okay because he's a high OBP guy. But you don't have a traditional leadoff hitter on that roster right now.
Yeah. No.
And they have zero team speed. There's not a guy on that roster that can run either.
Yeah, when Vasquez is your fastest runner, right. that's probably an issue.
I mean, you look around that lineup and you just look. There's zero speed, none.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we're gonna move on to the Tigers real quick. They signed Javi Baez to 6-year, $140 million. Now, when they signed Erod, we kind of fell into that trap. We're like, man, the Tigers are really gonna pull some strings here, and they're gonna make a splash. I mean, it's nice, but it's not the splash I was thinking. So instead of throwing a boulder in the lake, we threw a pebble. I don't think Baez moves the needle.
Yeah, I feel like you misspoke when you said the Tigers signed Baez. I feel like they settled for Baez.
I agree with you. I should have said that.
He was totally like the consolation prize. I feel like they had to have called on Correa, heard the number, and just went, no way. Because Baez makes no sense for them. I mean, Baez is fun to watch, but the guy swings at everything. He doesn't walk. He's not a high average guy. He hits with decent power, but that ballpark is going to seriously mute his power. He plays a good shortstop. He's not a great defender. He's got speed. He does some wild stuff on the bases, but he's not. And we talked about it. He's not the guy that you would build around. He's a good piece, but he's not the anchor. He's not the centerpiece.
Right.
And I'm struggling to see how Detroit thinks that Javi Baez is that player that they build around. Great talent, but he's not that kind of player.
Yeah, and he doesn't move the Tigers to have them compete with the White Sox. The White Sox again run away with that division. I don't see unless something dramatic happens after this lockout lifts, I see the White Sox running away with it again. I don't see anyone competing with that. The Twins are out. The Twins sold. The Royals are losing everybody and really haven't competed in years. I mean, other than the World Series, run they had in 15 and 16, 14, right. 15, 16. I mean, they sold. Tigers, no. Indians, no.
I
No one's
I
going to
I
compete.
look at this division as, I agree the White Sox are going to run away with it. The Tigers won't be the doormat anymore, but they're going to be another team middle of the pack.
Yeah,
They'll battle with the Indians to be a relevant second place finisher, and then the
yeah,
Twins and Royals will battle for who's the doormat.
yeah.
Um, and it's just, does this improve the Tigers? Absolutely, they're a better team after the
Right.
signing of Baez and Erod, but are they going to make a run in that division? Yeah, they're going to make a run from maybe like fifth to third, but who cares?
Right.
It doesn't. It's not going to dramatically change the outcome. They're still
Uh,
missing too many pieces, and I'm not even sure they could have filled them all in one off season, anyways. But
yeah.
but if you're the Tigers, you're not building for next year. You're building for like 24 and
And
25.
but
And
and who
Baez, I
knows
don't
if
think is the guy to build around to get there.
yeah. And who knows if they end up settling on the 14 team playoffs,
Yeah,
like the Tigers might end up getting in. I
yeah,
mean,
you could sneak in.
they could be
I
in,
mean,
yeah, they could be in the top 7 of the AL or however they're going to do the playoffs or whatever.
as the Braves have proven as the Braves have proven and other teams have proven, you don't have to be the best team going in the playoffs to win it all. You just
Nope,
have to get
just
in
gonna be
there.
hot.
You
Yep,
got to get invited to the dance if you're ever going to get out on
exactly,
the floor.
absolutely. We're gonna move to the Cubs. They signed Marcus Stroman for 3 and 71. Now, I think the Cubs are a sleeper here. I think the Cubs
Yeah,
could come in and get Correa. I really do. I think the Cubs could be. They're in prime shape to make a big signing when this lockout lifts because they got rid of everyone. They got rid of
yeah,
Peterson's contract. They got rid of Bryant and Rizzo. I mean, they
yeah,
completely tore the house down.
yeah.
And
They've got some money.
yeah, so it would not surprise me if Correa ends up there or Story ends up there. I mean, I want Story in Boston, but I mean, I think the Cubs are gonna buy a couple more here.
Yeah,
They're just waiting.
as it stands right now with Stroman in the fold, and keep in mind they're still paying Jason Hayward an insane amount of money for what he does.
He's terrible.
Um, talk about a guy that had that. I mean, and shame on the Braves, I guess, because he was their next big thing. But talk about a guy that's teased you for years and never delivered. But the Cubs only have $100 million committed. And really 25 of that's to Stroman and 22 of it's to Hayward. That's half your payroll on those two guys right now. So the Cubs have money to spend. And I agree. I think the Cubs, kind of quietly retooled things. And then when everybody forgot about them, they're going to start bouncing.
Yep, agree. And our final one, that the story just came out today. I had to scribble it down real fast. Is Max Scherzer is already making his voice heard in New York, saying he wants Buck Showalter as his manager. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're paying a guy $43 million, I mean, who needs a GM? He can do that job too. But I mean, I think Showalter might be the right fit in there. He might be the right fit for the Mets.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we talked about it either last week or a couple weeks ago. That Mets team is so undisciplined. The whole booing the fans nonsense. They ran all over, everybody in that organization. And I think you need to bring a guy like Buck Showalter in who's going to rein that in, create a little discipline, some accountability, and get these guys on the straight and narrow because you have too much talent in New York to suck like they did, with Alonso and Lindor, and now you got Scherzer and a healthy DeGrom likely. And I mean,
Right.
I mean, are they going to be the leader of the pack in the NL? No, but they're going to make some noise, and they should make the playoffs. But
Agree.
they need a manager in there, similar to the situation the Padres are in. You need a manager in there who's going to bring some structure and discipline and accountability and get these guys working together and cut out some of the noise they've created. And I think that Buck Showalter's probably the right guy to do that.
I agree. I am with Max Scherzer 100%. Now that I agree with him, I should at
Mhm.
least get like 1% of his payroll.
Yeah, I mean 1% you'd be doing all right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
I could probably retire.
I do like a guy like Max Scherzer signing that contract and immediately becoming a vocal leader because that Mets team hasn't had a vocal leader since probably the days of like Piazza. I mean,
Absolutely.
somebody needs to stand in front of that locker room and tell guys what's what, and this is how we do things here. And and as much as I don't like the fact he's in baseball, like Alex Cora does that for the Red Sox from the manager's seat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I think when Erod was messing around with Correa with the watch, and
Right.
you know, Cora pulled him in and basically said, "We don't do that here, kid. Cut it out."
Yeah.
You know, a guy like Buck Showalter, who's got a vocal veteran like Scherzer together, that clubhouse will not be the same, because those
No.
guys will not tolerate the shenanigans and
Right.
nonsense of what those guys did last year. And Javi Baez I think is a terrible leader and is an attitude problem. That's why I think Detroit's making a mistake putting a bunch of young guys around him. But
Yeah.
you know, Lindor's proven to be immature. You know, Pete Alonso doesn't say a word. He just goes out there and hits. You
Yeah.
need that guy who's going to gain the respect and control of that clubhouse.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that does it for heading home. Who knows if we'll have free agent talk next week? But we'll plug it with something else. But if we don't, so
Yeah, I mean,
thanks for what. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, I mean, if there may at least be some headlines around what teams are thinking to talk about. But
Exactly. All right. So please like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share our podcast. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching.
yeah, thanks everybody.